The following is an extract from Good News Week 2025 at the Lakes.
We're going to have a great talk happening by yourself today.
Sure.
You're going to be talking about answering kids' biggest question.
Yep.
Is that...
Yeah, and to, I suppose, speaking as a pastor, it will be answering their biggest spiritual question that they might ask you. And my experience with my 6 kids, toughest spiritual question I've ever had them ask me is, Dad, what happens after we die? And so I want to sort of delve into that today as we move through the talk.
All right, well, let me leave you to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll see
Thanks,
you in
Matt.
a little while. Okay.
Give him a round of applause, everyone.
Yeah.
Encourage him.
So before I jump into that deeper question, I want to start just by acknowledging kids love asking questions, don't they? I read a survey recently done, a copy of a survey by a child psychologist at Harvard University. And he said that on average, kids ask, we're going to go to the slides. We're going to go to the slides, ladies and gentlemen. How many questions? Oh, they're up there, they're not down there. So between the ages of 2 to 5 years, he worked out the kids asked 60,000 questions. I don't know how you work that out, but what I did was I worked back using a calculator, and I worked out that roughly that means kids ask 40 questions a day. No wonder parents are tired, eh? You're like, man, do we get long service leave from this gig or what? And there's many sort of, I wish you hadn't asked that question today type questions where, they ask you about where babies come from, or why do you have hair there? Or perhaps why does Auntie Mary drink so much, which is made even more embarrassing if Auntie Mary's standing right next to you, yeah? A friend of mine told me of this story recently where he'd prepped to give his son the birds and the bees talk. And he was nervous about it, and he's sort of done his homework. He's gone, these are the things I'm going to say. And he sat his son down. He's gone, well, son, let me tell you about. And he's gone into the spiel on the birds and the bees, and he's telling him this spiel. And he's, his kid's leaning forward, listening intently. And he's going, this is good, this is good. And he could see his son. And he said, mate, so do you understand everything I've told you? He said, yep. And he said, any questions? Kid said, yeah, I do have a question. He's thinking, how good's this? He's even asking me questions. What's your question, mate? And his kid looked intently and he said, do you reckon sharks could survive in space, Dad? Kids are random, aren't they? You think you're going down one path and you realise you're down the Pacific Highway and you're somewhere else. But questioning is not just a random thing that kids do. Before I was a pastor, I was a psychologist, and I did a lot of child management, child development stuff. And to me, what kids use questions for is it's a bit like they're doing a jigsaw puzzle. And they're asking all of these questions to fill out this jigsaw that provides them with a world map or a world view that helps them to manage the issues and the concerns that come up throughout their life. And so to do that, they come to trusted sources where they can believe and where they can understand the answers that they're given. And quite often that will be parents or grandparents or aunties or uncles. There was one, my wife and I were trying to think about funny questions our kids asked. And one night, and I won't say which kid, and it's not one of my kids here, so if their friends hear this wasn't one of them. One of our kids said, we're getting them ready for bed, and one of our kids came out and said, Mum, Dad, I got an itchy bottom. Yeah? And of course, if you're a parent, you go, mate, let me take you to the medicine cabinet, we'll give you some worming tablets and you'll be right. And of course, take them down, you open up. If you're a parent, you always run out of worming tablets, or maybe that's just my family. And it was like, mate, we've got no worming tablets. And I went, but I got a really itchy bottom. And it was like, look, and I said, we'll get worming tablets tomorrow. Mum said, I'll tell you what you need to do is just squeeze your cheeks together really tightly and you'll be okay. And anyway, we placated them eventually, got the kids off to bed. About 15 minutes later, we hear this, "It's still itchy." And we went, "Mate, you'll be right. Just squeeze your cheeks tightly together and you'll be okay. It's still itchy." And we wander in there, and of course, what's the kid doing? "It's not working." We need to give thought to not just how we would answer the question, but how is our kid going to hear what we're saying? Because often we communicate something, but what's received in this instance was quite different. And there is a serious side that I need to press into, that I have been asked to talk about questions, and I think that biggest spiritual question that I've ever been asked by my kids is what happens after we die. And it's a common question for kids because our world won't talk about it much. And they trust you, so they ask you. And I reckon it's okay to feel really unsure how you're going to respond to it, because it's a tough one at many levels. It not only buys into the reality of life and death, but for each one of us, we've experienced griefs and losses. And so even when we start to think about it, even now, many of you would be sitting in, "Yeah, I had a loss recently." And if that is you, I am so sorry for that. And I pray that today doesn't pick that scab off, but rather it might provide you with some real comfort. But if it is a tough time for you, I'm happy to have a yarn with you afterwards, as are some of the warm welcomers who've been around the last few days. And I reckon it's hard to answer that question, what happens after we die, in particular, because quite often kids will ask it after there's been a loss in the family. So grandma's died, and you're on your way to the funeral, you're on your way home, and they're going to say, "What happens after we die?" And there we are trying to process our own grief, yet we have the confused kid in front of us going, "I don't know what way's up, and I'm going to lean towards you." Now, our cultures throughout time have tried to answer that question, what happens after we die? And even here in Australia now, there's many different approaches. Some try and answer it through science, others through philosophy, and others through faith. And then there's a big percentage of people who go, "You know what, I'm going to ignore it because I just find it too difficult." And in fact, I read of a survey that was done by the funeral industry, and they surveyed 1,000 Australians recently, and they asked them that exact question: what do you reckon happens after we die? And 45% of Australians said, "I'm not really sure because I haven't thought about it much." 45%, almost half of the people asked said, I don't know, I haven't thought about it much. And it reminded me of a news item I saw earlier this year where there was a big lottery prize coming up, and they had this massive line of people outside the newsagent getting ready to buy their lottery ticket. And the reporter was going down asking each person, "What are you going to do when you win the lottery prize?" And one person was, "I'm going to pay off my house." Another person was, "I'm going to buy a really big boat." Someone else was, "I'm going to give a lot of money to each of my kids so I set them up for life." Another person had planned a world trip. Each of these people had already won that lottery in their mind, and they'd worked out what they were going to do with it. Guess what? Not a single person interviewed won that lottery. And in all likelihood, none of those people will ever win a lottery. But if you ask that same group of Australians that question, what happens after you will die, half of them will go, "Well, I don't know. I haven't thought about it." But I hate to be the bearer of bad news. You are more likely to be killed in a car accident going to buy a lottery ticket than actually ever winning the lottery. Every single one of those people will die, yet half of them go, "I'm not sure where I'm going or how to answer that." So I think given it is such an important question, I believe it's one we need to press into and give real thought to. Because, and particularly as parents or grandparents or carers, because those roles are a great privilege. And with any privilege comes great responsibility. Because the way we answer our kids' questions will shape their worldviews. It will shape how they think about things, and we need to be honest about our own beliefs. And if we don't have clarity and we don't give our kids clarity, then they'll search elsewhere. I'm not sure if you remember this ad, but I reckon this bears out a home truth. Can we play it now, Conrad?
Dad, why did they make the Great Wall of China?
That was during a time of Emperor Nazi Goring, and it was to keep the rabbits out. There's too many rabbits in China.
Okay, now Daniel will do his talk on China.
Yeah, I reckon that tells us two things. Our kids trust us. If you've got kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, they trust what you say. And the other thing I think it reinforces, if you saw that was a Telstra ad, and it said, broadband will help you get all the answers. I reckon if we're not reliable sources, then our kids will look elsewhere. And in the age of technology, our kids will look on the internet. I did a quick Google search of some celebrities and what they thought would happen after they die, and I thought I'd share it with you this morning. First one is Winona Ryder. She's in the new Beetlejuice, the Beetlejuice actress. This is what she said about her afterlife. My afterlife will be reliving comforting memories from my childhood, such as the sounds of my dad's typewriter and my mother's footsteps. Or Joy Behar. Now, you may not recognise her. She does a lot of voiceovers for things like Ice Age. She's also a comedian, and she has a whole lot of followers on Instagram. And she said this, she said, "I'm content with the idea of life ending with death and a concept of nothingness as straightforward and unscary." Maybe that's what you believe, and I'm not here to have a crack at that today. But I'm here to say, for me, the idea of a day with nothingness, let alone an eternity with nothingness, scares the hell out of me. Or Katy Perry. She said, "I believe in a heaven-like state." Okay, can sort of go with that. We'll define that later. But I also lean towards reincarnation. I'm not sure how a heaven-like state and reincarnation come together. Again, you may believe in reincarnation, and I'm not here to have a go at that. But to me, those definitions, those ideas seem to be people plucking things out of thin air. And I could go on with different celebrities, and maybe you're there thinking, Matt, it's unfair to go after actors like that. I'm going to say they're the ones who put their thoughts up online, and they are the ones that your kids, your grandkids, your nieces and nephews will read if you don't make sense in your response. So this morning I want to give an unapologetically Christian answer to the question of what happens after we die. And hopefully, in doing so, what I will do is encourage you to consider the clarity and the hope that Jesus' teachings bring. You see, I believe that Christianity offers a unique answer that can only be seen through the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. Unlike many other ways our world attempts to answer this question, Jesus' teachings leave no ambiguity to the answer of what happens after we die. Now, Jesus said lots of things when he was on earth, and those things are recorded in what we call the Gospels. They're in the Bible. And they're historical biographies of the life of Jesus who lived 2,000 years ago. And all I want to do this morning is I just want to share one statement that Jesus said while he was here on earth that will help us hopefully answer that question. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. I want to say fear of the unknown is natural, right? I love snorkeling. Last year I went snorkeling with some of my kids and we were having a beautiful time, and we came round a headland and we jumped up on the rocks to have a bit of a rest. And after we'd rested a bit, I said, okay, we're going to dive down into there, and we were diving down into deeper waters. And one of my daughters was next to me and she said, I'm not going in, Dad. And I said, you have to go in. The tide's going that way. We're going to dive in. I said, what's stopping you? And she pointed down at the deep water. And she said, I'm not going in because I don't know what's down there. That's the issue with this question, isn't it, of what happens after we die? The world can't answer that question. Science has tried and failed. Philosophy can't answer it. People make up their own answers like Katy Perry. But those answers are very wishy-washy. And I just want to really quickly look at how does Jesus replace that fear and that ambiguity with hope and clarity. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. I just want to unpack that statement really quickly. So Jesus is saying, I'm not just the one who rises from the dead, but I'm the one who gives new life. I'm the one who can give resurrection to other people after their physical death. I give people a new life where they don't experience spiritual death. And you might say, well, how's that possible, Matt? What's this resurrection of Jesus all about? Well, I want to give you a real quick snapshot of the Bible because that's what I have to do to answer that question. So the Bible tells us that God lovingly created the world and he desires a relationship with us. We are really special to him. But humanity rebels against God. We decide we can do it our own way. We know better. And that rebellion causes a separation between us and God. And because of our rebellion, we can't fix that chasm, that gap between us and God, no matter how hard we try. And then enter into human history, Jesus, who is more than a good moral teacher. He is the Son of God and he lives this perfect, sinless life. And he willingly takes the penalty for our rebellion, which we Christians call sin. And he does that by dying on the cross. He dies a death he didn't deserve. But that's not the end of the story. 3 days later, he rises from the dead, showing that he conquers death. And Jesus' resurrection isn't some fanciful thing. It's attested to in the Gospels. It's witnessed by many people. And even secular historians of that time reflect upon the impact of these claims in history. And through his death and resurrection, Jesus pays that price that we owe for our rebellion. And what that means is that he offers eternal life to anyone who'll trust in him. That's the hope that Jesus offers, a life forever reconciled to God, connected with God, where we're free from fear and uncertainty of death. So as Christians, we find 100% clarity that death is not the end, but it's a doorway. It's a doorway to eternal life with God, and Jesus opens that door and he invites us in. And we accept that invitation simply by trusting what he's done. So my answer to my kids, when they say to me, Dad, what happens after you die? Well, mine is this. If you put your trust in Jesus and what he's done, then after death in this life, you get to live with God forever. And then I do a quick PS and I go, by the way, heaven's not fluffy clouds and chubby angels, right? It's real living. It's real adventures without the yuckiness of this world. And it's walking with Jesus. But that's a different talk. So I want to say, when your kids ask you that pivotal question, what do you hope to communicate? It's our responsibility as parents not just to shrug our shoulders at this one and go, oh, I don't know, mate. I reckon this is one where, like many things, our talk and our walk need to match. And so I want to say your own beliefs around this is vitally important. And I want to offer you a gentle challenge. If you're not a follower of Jesus, I want to say, I reckon coming to know more about the claims of Jesus and thinking them through might offer a compelling and hopeful way to answer that tough question. But it's more than that. We as Christians don't just go, oh, we've got the answer. It's the joy of knowing Jesus and having a relationship with a Heavenly Father who loves us. So I want to say in closing, if your kids are asking you these big questions, consider that joy. That means they love you. That means they trust you. But as I say, with that comes a big responsibility. And I'm going to end by asking you my own question, which is what if the hope found in Jesus is the ultimate answer that your child and you are looking for? I hope it's one you're willing to investigate. And we at the Lakes here, we would love to be part of that journey with you as you do that. So I invite you to be talking to the people at your table about those things as we do head into the next break. But I'm going to invite Suze up now.